Patrick Riley, who was in the Boston Marathon race today. He's also a former military member. Mr. Riley, walk us through those moments when you first heard the explosions.
Sure. I had just crossed the finish line and was in the finishing corral, getting the medal and the blanket and all that stuff. And we heard the first explosion go off behind us, and we thought it was a little peculiar. And, we didn't think it was, obviously not a starting gun. Turned around, didn't really see anything, so we continued to go about our business. And then heard the second one go off, and that's when people really started to get concerned that this wasn't something that was, normal. And people started to kind of, there was a little bit of chaos. My fiance and my sister had just gotten off the T-stop there, were meeting me at the finish line. They saw the explosion go off, and then it just turned to chaos, and people were running everywhere. And eventually we met at the Westin Copley in the lobby there, and I think a lot of the concern was over the fact that family members couldn't get in touch with each other with the cell phone service down.
So you were fortunate enough that you did find your family. What were the streets like? Were people running? Was it fairly, considering what had just happened, fairly orderly? Walk us through the mood, the emotion that you saw there on the streets.
The people who had already finished the race and were kind of going through the finishing procedures were relatively calm because it happened behind them and they didn't exactly know what was going on. The people who had yet, and the spectators who were watching the finish line, those are the ones who kind of were very chaotic and just panicked. And there was, a lot of running, a lot of screaming. Once we met inside the Westin, we started to see some people crying, but still people didn't really know what was going on. And then one by one, the perimeter, they expanded the barriers, and you really couldn't get around. And you had to walk, blocks away to try and get out of the area.
Patrick, the police commissioner of Boston earlier implored people to either stay at home or stay in their hotels if they are guests, and certainly to avoid congregating in crowds on the street. Can you tell us whether the people of Boston are heeding those warnings and, in fact, staying in?
I think they're trying to, but the difficulty is getting out of the city with the public transportation shut down. We had to walk, after finishing the marathon, probably about 3 miles to get out, and luckily I was able to call a friend once I got out of the area where the cell phone was prohibited, call a friend who was able to come pick me up. But there was no taxi cabs anywhere in sight. The T system was completely shut down. So while I think people were trying to get to their hotel room or their residence, I think it was very difficult with a lot of the streets blocked off and the public transportation down.
And Patrick, can you describe the police and fire presence around you now?
They're very professional, kind of directing people to, the nearest place where they could get on the T, whether it be another line other than the green line, or directing people to take one of the buses across the river. So I think initially it was they were just getting organized and trying to figure out, okay, where are we going to funnel people? And then once that happened, I saw a little bit more organization. And obviously with all the law enforcement on the scene, they obviously responded very quickly.
And Richard, based upon your experience here in New York City, is that what you would expect to happen in Boston as well?
Yeah, the management of the movement of people is a big problem. It's frankly a much bigger problem here at this hour than it is in Boston, but it is making things worse for them. The decision to shut down the T is an interesting one. It was probably done out of an abundance of caution that may be the site of another attack, because these sorts of explosions are, in fact, of this scale, most deadly in the confines of a car. Frankly, I think they also wanted to keep people out of this central area. So Copley Square is one of the busiest T stations in the city, and they really didn't want people coming into it.
Patrick, let me just ask you, I know you said that when you heard the first explosion, you thought it sounded a little bit like a starter gun. We've been talking about the intensity of these explosions and the effects on your ears, basically. What did that sound like?
Well, I first turned to the person next to me and said that sounded like a howitzer going off. and we didn't know, were they doing construction somewhere in the area? Did something fall? I mean, it was clearly louder than a starter gun, but we were just trying to come up with a reason of why something like that something logical would have taken place, and something that loud clearly wasn't right. So we were probably maybe half a block away beyond it, and it was extremely loud.
When did you see the smoke?
I did not see the smoke because I kept going away in the direction away from my fiance. She had gotten off at the Heinz stop because Copley was shut down as, per regulations with the marathon, and was walking back to meet me at the Westin Hotel in
So
Copley
how did you,
Square.
in fact, learn what had happened?
I don't think I'd actually learned until we had met at the Westin, and we were trying to figure out how to get around, and then a police officer finally informed us of what actually was going on.